Impossible is just a word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it.
Oh,
Impossible is not a fact. It's an opinion. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. And that was a statement by Muhammad Ali. And then that's a quote that I have on my desk at all basis there. Because everything that you do at first feels impossible. But if you have the mindset of it's not impossible, you'll achieve it.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I am thrilled to have the founder and CEO of Kavani here with me today, Kevin Bartanian. Thank you so much for giving some time. I'm very honored that this is your very first podcast because your level of expertise is truly amazing. You're at the top of the game. I love that you also pour a lot into the local community. There's so many connection points here. So it's an honor to have you here.
Hi, Nika. I'm also thrilled and honored to be here with you today. I also love your name, by the way. It's my sister-in-law's name, which is a unique name that I've come across only several times around life. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I love that. Another little connection point.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your company. You have a wealth of experience in different organizations. You also are an investor in different companies, and you work in the out-of-home space, which I would argue is one of the most important advertising and marketing avenues that still exist, beyond podcasting, of course.
Of course.
So how did you start your journey? Why out of home? And how have you seen, these are going to be a lot of questions, so I'll go back. And then I definitely want to talk about the shift from traditional into the digital space.
Yeah, it sounds like how many minutes do we have? It's going to be a long story.
Yeah.
No, I think let's kind of go back on the journey question of Kavani. You know, my journey begins in Beirut, Lebanon, which is where I was born. I'm Armenian nationality-wise, and that's another story how we ended up in Lebanon. But I'm the youngest of 4 children. There's a 16-year gap between me and my oldest brother, which really shaped the kind of the family dynamic at the home. My life took a dramatic turn when my mother was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer. We moved to the U.S. for the kind of treatments that were available here. And she fought for several years and ultimately succumbed to the battle. And a few years later, after that point, really my entrepreneurship kind of fire was ignited in me. I learned to live kind of, every day as if it was my last because I had experienced death, fully embracing kind of every opportunity. The mindset, has been crucial, I would say, to my success.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, a couple of years after my mom passing, I started my first kind of experience was starting a flyer business with a friend of mine who I'm still friends with today. And the concept was we'd go to businesses, local stores and walk in and I would say, your flyer is horrible. We could do a better job designing the flyer and then we could distribute it for you as well. And through that experience, I met a lot of, owners and business CEOs who gave me advice along the way, also made money along the way. And that was kind of my first foray, I guess, into entrepreneurship. And then moving on, several years after that, obviously many years after that, I think the pivotal moment was when I really joined the Ritz Carlton leadership program, where I was in Pasadena, California. Really, that experience changed the way I look at customers, teams, empowerment, etc. I really figured out that, caring for customers doesn't really cost more money. The whole concept of ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen really also resonated with me about how do you treat internal employees as well as everyone outside and how you have a superior product in the marketplace to kind of differentiate yourself from competitors and deliver on service. And I think that was also, a great learning point for me that has elevated my kind of professional career and ultimately led to Kavani.
Wow.
And a few years after that, I started a company called Intellects Media, which was essentially a digital advertising company, but before the internet. So that was essentially converting catalogs and the ability to purchase items from catalogs on CD-ROMs.
Oh,
And
wow.
I did that right before really high school internet really kicked in. And then I sold that company. And years after that, I joined a company called JCDecaux, which was the largest outdoor advertising company in the world. I had great mentors there. It's also a family-owned business. So I learned about the business as a long-term position where you wouldn't make short-term decisions and how you have to make long-term decisions and all that. And really, that was in the out-of-home space, a really good learning experience for me. And then which eventually, after a couple of years after that, I launched Cavani.
It sounds like a through line in your education and business was bringing people along, really learning from great mentors, getting to understand how to nurture relationships and really see the customer as the hero. I talked to some of my students at USC about that. We're not the heroes of our journey. The customer is the hero. And for some of them, that was an aha moment. And I think it's something that a lot of times businesses don't get right. So the fact that you were really able to see how to create this empathy throughout your path and how that helped lead you to more success and to then eventually going out on your own, starting Cavani after you'd had these other business experiences.
Yeah, what was it? Steve Jobs who said you can only connect looking backwards, right? Like you kind of where you are today, you can't do it in the process. You can just kind of set a goal. But yeah, it's an interesting thing that you can realize now after a year.
What are some of the biggest things that you learned in your entrepreneurial journey? It sounds very easy, right? Like it's just been a straightforward path to success.
Yeah.
But I know we all have our ups and downs and things that we have to learn to get better in our next businesses. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that, because when you started the flyers, you said that you could do them better, but did people really, did it take much time to get that first customer in the door?
Yeah, so the word entrepreneur is a French word, I think, and I don't really know what it means. But to me, it stands for like, hey, you have a great idea, you believe in the idea, and you execute, right? Or you build it. The number one thing I learned through the process, I think, is be resourceful, right? So I think picking up a phone call or sending an email to a mentor, to someone that's in your industry when you're starting out to ask for advice, you will be surprised by the amount of people that are willing to help others, especially if they're advanced in their position and they're confident in that position. And I still do that today, right? So having the right kind of be resourceful to move, to ask questions, I think, and to pivot when needed, I think is something that you really need to do. You have to be compelling, I think is another key point that I think a lot of people overlook. And there's a difference between being compelling and being, cocky or something that's kind of harsh. It's just about you knowing your market, you knowing your audience, you knowing your product, you being an expert in everything you're doing or you're talking about. And so that's how you build a team around you, and that's how you sell your product. So you have to be compelling. I think speed matters, right? I think not speed to... And there's a whole concept in obviously Silicon Valley that talks about, get the product out as soon as possible in beta mode or something like that. I'm not talking about that. I probably don't really align with that, but I'm talking about speed to service really matters. Oh. To me, what that means is every person within your team should be really empowered to make decisions, to take care of customers immediately without really going through an approval process or a hierarchy of people that they have to go through. So if a customer calls with a complaint, the person taking that call can actually fix the problem. That could be different scenarios for every business. For us, we could talk about our customer groups, but it ranges from community to advertisers, brands, agencies, as well as developers and partners. Yeah. We talk about that as well. And then you have to surround yourself with talent. A lot of time, like, when you first start, you might think that you have to be the smartest person in the room, and that's not the case. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room when you're building a team. You want to hire people that are smarter than you or have the potential of being better than you at some point, and you want to train them to get them there. And that's how everything gets elevated. Another thing that comes to mind is kind of embracing challenges as they come up. You know, you will lose a contract, you would lose a client, you will lose employees that are critical to your business. How you react is really important. So you shouldn't really hide from the storm, so to speak. You should be able to dance in the rain, right? That's a famous saying. The sooner you do that, the stronger you're going to be and the easier your life is going to be. You'll always experience that throughout your entrepreneur kind of life, but you get better at it and dealing with it and faster to react to it. So I think that's really key. And then hire well, I think is my last point, which is really the hardest one. I think as we grow a company, how do you hire talent that fits the culture, that fits your mission as a company, and aligning with that is probably the hardest thing to do as your company grows.
Yeah.
That would be my kind of things that if I look back, those are the things that come to mind.
Well, that was amazing that you had such a robust list immediately at your fingertips. I feel like you should write a book to help people, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they look at the rainbows and the sunshine, or I'm going to be my own boss, but they don't consider all of the things that you just mentioned and how much time and attention you need to pour into those as you have with your company and really making it feel like family. So I wanted to ask, what was it that compelled you to say, I have experience in this field, but I see a way I can do something different, and I need to start my own agency?
Yeah, so I identified a void in the marketplace. So through the out-of-home business has been around for a long time. I think the first billboard was in 1833 as kind of a recognized documented billboard. So through the last several decades, and then also some background, out-of-home started as a local business, kind of serving local communities. But through the last several decades, there was several consolidation efforts. So really the largest out-of-home companies are the top three. So eventually they're also publicly traded, etc. So eventually in my view, I saw the void that they lost connection with their communities. Mm-hmm. It all became about adding more inventory and selling as many advertising spots as possible. So and then that created, sometimes negative relationships with local communities. So we tried, that's the void that we identified. And some of the work that I had done at the Ritz, some of the work that I had done at JC2Co, some of the work that I had done at other places really brought all that to me kind of with one clear idea, which was, if we had to do this all over again, this business, how would we do it? And in our mind, we have three customer groups. The first one is the community piece. We feel like we're occupying people's space. It makes us think about curation a lot more, design of the structure, what content will resonate with people here. It's how do we give homage to the environment, really fit, similar to how an architect builds a building in a place where it takes all these things into consideration. We did the same thing with the media space. And it's almost like a civic gesture and a promotional medium at the same time in our view. And our second customer group we clearly identified as the advertiser and agency, which obviously benefits from being in places that people want them to be in. And then the third is the developer. And that developer can be a sports team, it could be a city, it could be building owner, etc. We treat each of these customers equally the same. And the first customer, the community, we don't necessarily touch or talk to everything, but we make our decisions on everything as if they're in the room with us. They're like a silent person, a voting member of every decision. So that's the void that we identified, and that's what we built our company on. And it's been successful because we take a very kind of a boutique approach to the business. Every location, every story is different. It's personalized service. That goes back to the Ritz experience again. And then everything is really unique to the offering.
Yeah. I was just thinking back to, I worked with an organization in South Los Angeles that is now called, it used to be Community Health Councils, now it's Rising Communities. And during that transition to their new name, we were trying to figure out new ways to create awareness in the community and some surveying and some other programs that they were launching. So one thing I recommended to them was out of home, and we decided to focus on bus transit shelters, which, I did work with one of the main big companies.
Yep.
And so I see your point there. And it was really interesting to think about where the most high traffic areas right, in the community, making sure we're translating into Spanish so that we had English and Spanish versions so that it would really meet the needs of the community. And then we, nodding to your interest in engaging the local community and also making sure that it's aesthetically pleasing, we used different artists to create the posters that we were sharing. So we incorporated a lot of these things that you're talking about. And so I'm happy that the organization chose to do that.
Yeah.
But I also would love to talk to you about how do you decide, when somebody comes to you, an agency or an advertiser with their goals, what's the right mix of different forms of out of home? What are the forms that exist today? And are you seeing a lot of it still as static, one-dimensional, or are you seeing most things move to the digital space now?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, that's great execution of the plan, because I would say curation of content and making your content resonate with people is the best idea. And what resonates with people is that. Well, we see so many advertisers use content that they use everywhere, not really customize it in each location. I think the fact that you did that is still number one kind of effective way of using out of home. So to reset out of home outdoor advertising is a really reach and frequency format, right? So it's kind of covering a broad audience in specific areas of interest. You can narrow it down to specific cities and geolocation. So within those places, there are multiple formats. There are street level formats, which you talked about, which is bus shelters, benches, etc. There is transportation options like buses, metro, etc. There's regular billboards that are along the highways and freeways. There are spectaculars, which is one of a kind type of units, which is kind of more along the lines of what we offer, which is in places that have a major kind of gathering that touches the entire city, that has a huge kind of frequency, but doesn't, go into every city. It's just one location. So it's kind of your spectacular unit that you'll buy. I mean, the reach is massive, but it's outside of a place that makes sense for your campaign. And it's not about one or the other. It's having a really, this is where agencies come in and help you with that plan, would be having a robust plan based on your objectives and what you're trying to. Believe it or not, we have advertisers that only launch campaigns specifically to take a picture to give it to a celebrity so it can live online. And there is no reason for that to be looking at effective out of home, but using that on the secondary media channels, which is Instagram, is more important to them. And they'll buy one billboard in one location, and really that's how they use the billboard. It's online. So we have several clients that do that. And then there are clients who are local clients who are looking for effective measure and all of that, and their target the specifics. And then as it relates to the question about the digital conversion is really small. I mean, us Cavani-wise, 93% of our inventory is digital. We have a lot of full motion digital inventory as well. But if you look at the market kind of on its full nationally, it's a small percentage. But it is growing, and it has to be, again, goes back to each community. Every location is unique. Everything has to make sense from an investment standpoint. But we're seeing a huge growth. And other markets like London and France are growing much more rapidly, and they have more of their inventory digitized. But US is so large that, it takes us a while to catch up.
Yeah. I was laughing a little bit when you talked about the experience of an advertiser that might buy one billboard, because it does make me think of the digital billboards in Times Square.
Yeah.
And the little secret a lot of people don't know is that anybody can purchase a small space for 15, 30 seconds. And there are a lot of people who will buy that, make sure that they're standing in front of it in Times Square, right when it's going to pop up, so they can take the picture, and then everybody can say, oh my gosh, that's so amazing that you got on, billboard in Times Square. So that's a little different instance, of course, but I think it is interesting to see how people are starting to personally leverage technology as well for their personal brands or their small businesses, not just the large ones that we usually think about with out of home.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we see, like, we've done campaigns with Kevin Hart in front of a billboard announcing his marathon in Chicago. We tied with a brand, and then it's a brand there initiative. So. And then you have smaller companies to do that, what you just said, to just kind of make it almost billboards are nostalgic, right? In the sense that if you're on a billboard, you feel like you've made it. And I think that resonates with people, and people use it in different ways creatively to create the viral component of it.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the viral component, it seems like a lot of emphasis right now is put on the streamers, right? Because now a lot of them take advertising. They have the levels that you can just watch for free, but you have to see all the ads. And so a lot of people are trying to figure out how to game the system. We see a lot of companies like Expedia creating their own ad tech network. And people, of course, always talking about social media. So I'd like to talk to you about the relevance and importance of out of home. Is it a growing part of the market? And it's obviously still relevant, especially in a car culture when people are on the roads and traveling. But do you see it growing compared to these other things that are kind of the shiny new object that people are really talking about in the media landscape?
Yeah, I mean, statistically, from a growth standpoint, I think we're the second fastest growing medium, right after the digital and internet, obviously, which has the biggest bulk of growth. To kind of level set, as we talked about, like the billboard business has been around, since 1833. It's still one of the oldest mediums. And the unique thing about the time that we're in, you just mentioned Expedia introducing an ad tech brand and others, et cetera. And media is largely fragmented. So you're being bombarded by messages throughout the day. So that helps us, right? Because we're in a real estate, we're in a physical space. It's something tangible you can feel, you can see in your daily commute, or when you're going to a sports game, when you're driving home, when you're in a cinema, when you're in a metro, whatever the situation is. It's a physical thing that can't be blocked or in any way kind of moved away from, right? And then at the same time, more people live in the cities than they ever have. So urbanization has really taken place. So we have a lot of areas that are condensed with people. So within that, where we have out of home, obviously we're speaking to a massive audience. And then digital obviously has helped tremendously in our growth and our continued growth within our space, because the same thing you're able to do on mobile, where you can specifically choose geofence in the area or what have you, you can do with it out of home very much the same way. We even have like things like we don't have like real cookies, things like the mobile has. We have like physical cookies. And what I mean by that is if, like, let's say, for example, at the LA Convention Center, you have an anime convention. And this is a real example, by the way. So we had an anime convention. So you have a profile of who is going to attend that anime convention, just fans of people who like animated content, right? So Hulu bought our screen, which is Fixed Spectacular, which is right outside. It's right in front of, Crypto.com Arena at LA Live. So as people are leaving the convention center, they're looking at Hulu, and Hulu is reminding them that Hulu has the largest collection of animated content, right? So you've kind of physically identified a cookie, which is, hey, majority of people are here, they're passing by the sign, they're going to be fans of this content, and we're going to serve them at the right place. And then you saw people taking photos with it, posting it. The brand created a connection, contextual relevancy with its audience, and it was really powerful for them. And we see a lot of things like that on the physical side, but digital gives you all sorts of capability. If someone's leaving a concert, or someone's leaving a game, whether the team won, lost, a brand can celebrate it, or kind of give messages that ties into that content or that real life experience. Yeah. I think you can't do that with anything else in that kind of scale. And ultimately, it's also cost effective. Our ROI is low. There's a lot of services out there that are kind of doing the studies for brands. You can kind of track the path to purchase, all sorts of things. And then we also audited by GeoPath, which we deliver on impressions. And you could, it's vetted out, etc. So that's made the industry much more mature and better.
That was actually my next question was, how do you measure the results? If, for instance, coming out of the anime festival, seeing Hulu, is it, as you were mentioning, for example, people taking pictures in front of the sign? Is it the number of people who sign up to Hulu after seeing that? What are the different measurements that you usually see people or brands and advertisers and agencies want delivery on? And is there one success metric in terms of the behaviors that a customer is engaging in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So to level set, we deliver on impression, which is basically it accounts for and indexes towards people driving on the road, who's actually seeing it, people walking on the road, how visible the sign is, etc., who lives in that specific area, the gender, household income, etc. We can deliver on that. And that system has been around for probably about a decade now. It changes on a regular basis, updates itself. And that's kind of the number that we have that we transact on. And there are other services out there that provide real-time data based on auto traffic or people that have opted into GPS systems, et cetera, that some advertisers will purchase in addition to the impression numbers to just get real-time data. But the effectiveness is really measured in multiple ways, and it just depends on the brand. So sometimes and the brands that we deal with are on the national scale, so they're national brands. So a lot of times they have first-party data that they won't share with us, but they'll notice a lift themselves based on different things that they're tracking, whether that be social media connections, whether that be web traffic from the sign area, whether that be actual store purchases, and they know their audience, who's going in, who's going out. So they sometimes don't share that data. We can only know that it works because they keep coming back for campaigns. And that's kind of the way we do it. There's also arbitration studies that we can actually do as well that could track, again, the path to purchase. Attribution study, sorry, I said attribution.
Yeah.
So different types of things like that exist. But ultimately, with the national brands, we're seeing a lot of times that they have their own data and they're judging it based on their data and they never want to share their data and keep asking them. And we also fund studies for the right campaigns ourselves for brands to kind of see the effectiveness of the campaign.
That brings us to the work that you do in the community. You mentioned community as one of your 3 customer pillars. And I know some of the work you've done has included using local artists to paint murals, helping reach underserved communities by giving space to local nonprofits to get their mission out there. And you're also very active in the community yourself, sitting on boards and really, helping bring the arts to people. At what point did you decide that this was something that you could embed into your agency? Was it from the beginning one of your core values, or did you have to get to a certain level before you then were able to say, oh, we have 5% of space that we can donate?
So when we think about the community element, it starts from our growth, right? Our mission statement and kind of our initial formation of Cavani and our customer groups where we talked about earlier, community was a big part of that. And a lot of things we do, I feel like people won't know, right, that we're doing. And it feels right. And, we don't want them to know. We're not looking for recognition. And those are things that we make decisions on every single day that we pretend the customer is in our room. And the customer being the community and the people that live around our signs, where we make decisions, whether that be, material choices of how a structure should look, the size of things, the quality of LEDs, if we're using a digital, the decision to do digital or hand paint, and all these elements that go into us making decisions on every single location, even the naming of our locations, because each of our locations has a unique name. That's how we go to market. That's kind of our strategy that we did from day one. All of our assets have a unique personality and a unique place. And that forces us to think about the community element. And then the type of advertisers that we want on that screen. A lot of times you pass our board and you feel like, oh, wow, like you might not even notice because it just feels like it belongs. And that's what the feeling we want to portray. And that strictly comes to us from our community element, whether that's an art piece that you see, whether that's community nonprofit messaging you see, whether you see, outside of a location, a relevant message that's tied to that location. All of that is curated experience that we're providing that we're not looking for recognition on. On specifically nonprofit initiatives, we've always provided space to nonprofits since day one. But earlier this year, Diana Serrano, which was kind of our second employee hire, she took on this initiative, and we kind of came up with a process where we identify locally at every location of our sign nonprofits around a specific area and reach out to them. A lot of times they think that we're calling and there's a catch.
Right.
And they're like, what are you trying to sell me? We can't afford. We're like, no. We like your cause. We think it will resonate with our audience. We're going to give you the space for free. And some of the space that we're providing, like one spot will cost, $50,000 a month or something like that, and upwards. And they're getting it at no cost. And then we're not getting any of the benefits from a tax write-off purposes either, or things like that, because it's space that we're giving. So we do it just because it's the right decision to do it. And that's kind of the concept that we have. But a lot of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis will never be noticed. The only things that people will notice if something is out of place. Mm-hmm. So if an advertiser it doesn't feel right on the board, we'll be called out. If nothing is happening, then it's all good. And luckily, we haven't had any of those called out either. So that's great. That's what we know we're doing right.
I appreciate that intentionality. I think about, we were talking before we got on, I live in the South Bay, so in Redondo Beach, and when I'm driving down PCH, there are a lot of billboard locations where I go, okay, that one is right above a house. How did that get approved? Oh, the lights are so bright. How do the people who live there feel about that?
But exactly.
Why is that ad in this community? It doesn't seem like it matches with demographic, all of those things. So I think that's the typical, right? That's the standard. Yeah. So the fact that you're trying to raise the standard and build authenticity and this connection with your local communities, there's no better thing than that. And that's what's going to keep making the difference and keep people coming back and appreciating the work that you do.
Agreed, Bob. Thank you. But I do definitely agree with that. And that's what we want people to think of when they think of Kavani. From the community side, from the brand side, from the developer side, we do the right thing every time. And that's what we strive to do every single time. So it goes back to how we started the company and how we want to elevate the conversation when you think of outdoor advertising. And we don't call them billboards. We call them media destinations, iconic media. We purposely call it certain things so that you don't get, in the same bucket, so to speak, as other sites.
Yeah. You're talking about how sometimes you'll fund studies yourself. And before we jumped on, I also mentioned, I just downloaded a study that you did about neuroscience and the effect of advertising. So we talked just a little bit about that. What was your reasoning for deciding to create this study, and what will somebody learn from it?
Yeah, the real takeaway from us was, from our perspective, we spent a lot of time building and developing these assets. Some of them take, years for us from the start of the conversation to actually building the sign will take years, right? So we spent a lot of time, and we wanted to see if the things that we're doing, we knew what it was doing, but we wanted to prove that it was doing the things that we thought it was doing. So one of the things is, when we build the sign, we don't build them in the same line of sight as other things. We try to get the right scale where you see it. It doesn't feel too big. It doesn't feel small, but it creates an arresting sensation. And that's kind of what we strive for. We spend a lot of time kind of being in a lot somewhere and looking at people pass by and try to understand who's there, physically there, before we build it. And we always knew that having a sign kind of with all these attributes will have a better recall rate, right? It just makes sense. There's nobody around. It's bigger. It creates a resting sensation. And that's kind of the study was based around that. So if you, for example, we were able to prove that if you're in a place like Times Square, for example, where your excitement level is really high, so you have a high cognitive load, your memory recall goes to basically non-existent, right? So if you walk away, even though at that moment you might take photos, you can live online, but if you walk away, you're not really remembering what you just saw, right? But with things that don't have a lot of things competing with the sign, and you have a low cognitive load, your memory recall goes really, really high. And then the study highlights those differences. That's kind of the main reason that we did. We tried to prove the fact that we're spending all this time. The sign is not just a sign. Impression is just not an impression. And it's not one of many. These unique sculptural type locations really stand out and people remember them.
Fantastic.
And I think there's different layers to that. I think the next study would be what you talk about, curated content, right? Performs better. We need to prove that on the study because we know it does. people react to it. There's studies that it does, but we'll do our own study at some point to show that as well. We know there's been studies that 79% or something of exposure leads to people to go to their website when they see that on a mobile device. They interact with the brand that they saw on a billboard. So there's industry-wide studies as well to help that case.
Amazing. What do you see as the next big thing for Cavani?
Next big thing for Cavani. I think we're just getting started, right? So we have a lot to go. We want to take our time on growth. There's a lot going on in Los Angeles specifically where majority of our inventory is in. So for the next 5 years, our full concentration and a lot of our main inventory growth here for us in Los Angeles. You're familiar with the Olympics coming here. We have Super Bowl coming here. We have NBA All-Stars. We have US Open.
World Cup.
World Cup, yeah. So just throw that in the mix. So LA is really exciting right now, and we're at the forefront of it. We have a lot of inventory that's exciting for a lot of brands, and we got to do this right. And we're not just, again, building for just building. We're also in Baltimore in a substantial way. We have the largest asset there. We like that market. We're also kind of dipping our toes in New York. But LA, for the time being, is kind of our growth. And we started with digital programs here. Really, before us, no one had done digital, and there were no digital sites in LA. But now you're seeing them. And we want to find the next market. We want to be early to market, kind of grow that and take our time. We have a 100-year vision as opposed to a 2-year vision, 5-year vision. We're playing the long game, legacy game. So that's what we're doing.
I'm really happy to hear that, because I think that's something people don't talk about a lot in their own lives and their own businesses. But also, I don't know that I've had anybody express that on the podcast, even about leaving the legacy of your business in a very specific way, making sure you're taking the time. It's not about the quick growth. It's about being really intentional, taking your time to get it set up really well.
Yeah, I really think that, to the core of me and the structure of the company and everyone within our company, we want to we get a lot of happiness from giving back, right? Or being service to others. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of our core of our business is if you look at the combination between our customer groups, our inventory, so much attention, we want to be in service to others. So with that, you can't have short-term goals, right? Because that short-term, if you have a short-term objective, you can either achieve it or not achieve it. But once you achieve it, then what, right? So you have to have a mission. The mission kind of lasts a lifetime. You'll never achieve a mission because a mission is what you stand for. And I think that any business should really create a mission statement for themselves when they first start. It shouldn't be about product specific. It could be general things. So like for us, it's about creating memorable impressions. Well, it's about creating personalized service for every customer group that we have. And that's embodied in our mission statement. And that, 10, 20 years or 50 years, I should say, if billboards are no longer because people are flying all over in the sky, we're still going to find a product or a solution that's delivering memorable impressions and whatever that technology is, right?
Yeah.
So for us, it's not about the structure, it's about the service of creating memorable impressions. And then if you have that kind of Bible, everything you do changes. Like if a client sends us a bad creative, we're like, listen, it's not going to create a memorable impression. Like, are you sure you want to use this creative? So we have those hard conversations. Our team is built on a mission. So then they're able to be empowered to make decisions because they rely on the mission. Everything, as soon as you have kind of the mission statement, the cultural setup of the company is also birthed from that. And every decision you make is going to be a lot easier for you. And then you have a long-term projection because you're not operating in the now or 5 or 10 year. You already have plans for that, but you're really looking at a legacy business.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed learning more about the out-of-home business, your perspectives, your background, and just the intentionality. I keep using that word, but it is so important to see that you are truly not just successful in business, but a lot of it is because you've looked at the customer and you've included the community as one of your key customers. You've thought about the long-term legacy Just things that I think people sometimes forget when they start the business and they maybe want to make a quick buck. They're not thinking about this. And this is what is going to keep you going. This is what's going to keep Kavani growing. And Kevin, I just thank you. I really appreciate this.
It's been such a pleasure. I really enjoyed my first podcast.
Yay.
And I'm glad it was with Anika.
Right? It was easier than you anticipated, hopefully.
It was.
And we, of course, will put the website in the show notes. But Kevin, one last question. Do you have a favorite quote, mantra, family motto, verse, words that drive your personal mission, your business, or both?
Impossible is just a word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it.
Oh.
Impossible is not a fact. It's an opinion. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. And that was a statement by Muhammad Ali. And then that's a quote that I have on my desk at all bases there. Because everything that you do at first feels impossible. But if you have the mindset of it's not impossible, you'll achieve it.
Yeah. That one's never been used on the podcast either. Yeah. So it's a lot of firsts today. Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Kevin Bartanian, founder and CEO of Kavani. And thank you to everybody who's watching or listening to this episode. I will be back again with another amazing guest to share their tips, tricks, and insights for you to think about on your own business journey. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.